Okay, welcome to the Unity presentation as part of our SDV602 project Milestone 1. This is a brief overview and presentation about the Unity game engine, which is the game engine and IDE that we've been using for our project Milestone. Sorry, we'll just start our slideshow there. Boom. Okay, so basically, what is Unity? Unity is a cross-platform game engine and interactive design environment that was developed by Unity Technologies. It was first announced and released in 2005 at an Apple Worldwide Developers Conference. Unity can be used to create content, and that's not just games, that's all sorts of content in 2D, 3D, virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, and probably also other platforms as well. It's used by other industries, not just the gaming industry, even though it was originally intended as a gaming engine, but it is used by architecture, engineering, construction, and automotive companies. Unity uses C# as its primary scripting language. I mean, when you're working with Unity, you have the IDE, the design environment, but then you also use scripts, which are separate blocks of code that you apply to objects in the design environment to give them behaviors or looks or anything like that. Now, they used to previously support Unity Script, which was a JavaScript hybrid language, and another language called Boo, but as of these days, they essentially just support C#. And as of 2018, their platform had been extended to support more than 25 platforms, which is amazing. So, on to our next slide. A little bit about the history of Unity. It was originally founded by David Helgeson, Nicholas Francis, and Joachim Arndt, and they called it Over the Edge Entertainment. And these guys are all from Denmark, and they formed the company in Denmark in 2004. And it was one of those classic stories. They were all young guys. They lived together in a house. They had no money. They sort of had the big dream to basically become a game development studio. And that was the intended use for the early sort of Unity engine. They basically built it to support their game studio to enable them to make games. They decided that they were going to focus on the Mac OS market, which back then was very, very small. So it was probably not the greatest business idea, but that was their plan. And they created their first game called Gooball in 2005 for the Mac. Unfortunately for them, the game was a total flop, really. And in the aftermath of that, they basically decided that they weren't going to make games anymore, but they were really happy with how their game engine and suite of development tools had worked out. So basically, they decided that they would use this as a way to market this to other developers, as a way to basically like streamline and simplify game development for small and medium-sized companies that didn't kind of have big budgets and access to a lot of resources. And so Unity is essentially, at its most basic form, a free service. In 2007, OTEE, Over the Edge Entertainment, changed their name to Unity Technologies. And basically, they always continued to have quite a close relationship with Apple. In 2006, they won runner-up at the Apple Design Awards, which was quite a big deal for them at the time. They were still quite a small company at this point. But then in 2007, Apple released the iPhone, and that was huge. And Unity at the time was one of the few compatible development platforms. Basically, that just meant they were ideally placed to really take advantage of it, and it enabled them to dominate the iPhone market for years and years, pretty much with no competition whatsoever. And that enabled them to really put a lot more money and resources and grow as a company. And yeah, since then, Unity is the multi-platform game engine that, can boast statistics such as that they have 5.5 million registered users. In surveys, they are said to be used in 53% of mobile phone development, supports more than 25 platforms, so hugely popular. Now, the advantages of using Unity are increased productivity, you have access to high quality graphics, and not just graphics, but also light effects, particle effects, fog, a lot of really interesting graphical things that you can do. There's a lot of supporting documentation for Unity development and a large active supportive development community. As we mentioned, Unity is multi-platform, so build your Unity game once and theoretically, maybe with a little bit of tweaking, you can roll that out to multiple platforms. So that's really a bit of a game changer for people. It comes with its own IDE development environment. It can create 2D and 3D games. There are huge libraries of game assets, including like sprites, animated assets, you name it's out there. It's quite staggering. Unity also supports a really good physics engine that's quite, basically you apply physics to objects in Unity and it just works. It's quite cool. As mentioned, it uses C# as a scripting language, and it's really pretty easy to get into Unity and to start. Once you've actually built something in Unity, it is apparently really easy to deploy it out to the market. So the disadvantages of Unity, there's not a huge amount of disadvantages, to be honest. Apparently, Unity is not good for large teams. If you have multiple developers working on the same scenes or things like that, that apparently it actually kind of crashes the engine. So there's a bit of an issue there. If you do want to have all the really top shelf features of Unity, you do have to pay for it, and that's not the cheapest. Um, Unity does not give people access to their source code. So basically, I believe the Unreal Engine and a couple of the other sort of competitors of Unity actually do kind of have their source code out there. So if a developer has an issue that's not directly their own code and it's something to do with the IDE, if the IDE is Unity, you kind of don't really have a leg to stand on. You can't get in there and mess around with things to make stuff work. Also, Unity applications and games do have quite a high memory requirement, and that's basically because you have so much stuff in the background with Unity that's sort of running that you may or you may not be using, but it is there running to support all the functionality of Unity. And of course, this is where this term generic code comes in as well, because Unity is basically built to support so much that if you're doing a relatively specific thing, you're going to have a lot of background code and files and dependencies and such that you're not actually going to be using, but they're built in there to support that kind of multi-platform, wide-ranging development. Okay, so of course Unity is most well known for being a games development engine, and honestly, it's basically impossible to really say how many games have been made with Unity. It's that many games, and it's from really large, very polished, successful games to the smallest little indie games just made by someone in their bedroom. Um, Now, basically, 2D and 3D games work really well in Unity. They've actually been quite highly regarded for their 2D games. So we'll go through them. We'll look at just a handful of some of their more well-known games. I'm not going to bore you too much, but Subnautica is a hugely popular one, and you can see this is a really lovely, polished sort of 3D game. The premise is you live under the ocean, kind of a survival type game. Let me see. Hollow Knight was it's basically a 2D platform sort of game. So again, this is kind of, even though Unity is this massive 3D engine, it supports quite nice 2D development. Of course, Pokemon Go came from Unity, hugely successful, made them a lot of money at the time. And this is kind of using augmented reality, so you're sort of getting a bit of an idea of the versatility of the Unity engine there. Escape from Tarkov which is a sort of photorealistic first-person shooter, which is really, really highly regarded. Uh, Cuphead, which was again, it's a 2D one. It's sort of done with that kind of vintage graphics sort of style, and that was very popular as well. Kerbal Space Program, which is people in the sort of science and physics communities love this because it's the physics are apparently amazing. You're basically trying to get your little men into spaceships and off the planet and onto the moon and off into the solar system and such. But yeah, apparently the physics are really amazing and are actually so good that people who are physicists and are into this stuff love playing this game. Okay. Oh, and Ori and the Blind Forest, which I mean, this one won awards. It was hugely popular. It's a platform game, but just beautiful graphics. Okay, so some of the platforms that Unity supports. I mean, there are so many. You're basically quite hard put to find platforms that Unity doesn't support. I won't bore you by going through the list, but as you can see, all the big players are supported from sort of Windows and Mac and Linux to the console market with PlayStations and Xboxes and Nintendos to smart TVs. Um, and of course, the phone, iOS and Android, Steam Virtual Reality, just honestly, all the big guys are supported. Though one slight complaint about Unity is that they perhaps to this point haven't focused too heavily on the console market, kind of. But I believe that that's something that will change as they need to. So, future direction of Unity. I mean, basically, they continue doing what they're doing and they're golden. But sort of late, their focus seems to be they're getting a little bit more business in the Chinese market. They're kind of pushing in that direction a little bit. There are a lot of actual Unity developers who work in China, and so they're just. But of course, China with its rules over internet and everything like that is been a little bit of a closed market. But they are actually just starting to make some inroads. They've got a few reciprocal things going on with Chinese cloud-based companies, so they're starting to really get a bit more momentum in that market. They have said that they want to put more focus into augmented reality and augmented reality tools. It's the thing about Unity is while it is a hugely popular game engine, they don't just see it that way. And so the focus on sort of education in particular. I mean, one thing that some of the developers said is they'd really love to get Unity, as basically a bread and butter sort of thing in education, that it could be a powerful sort of tool in education. And I mean, of course, they love the idea that people would come out of education providers being quite skilled in using Unity and then able to take those skills into the workplace. And also, Unity is increasing their use of machine learning in the Unity development. So that's not just for machine learning to support graphics and physics and things like that, but they're also actually using that machine learning to kind of build AI for assets in game and stuff like that. So that'd be very interesting how that all sort of develops. But yes, that basically concludes our wee talk about Unity. Hope you enjoyed, and yeah, thanks again.